Now, as we've been discussing, default rates for municipal bonds are down this year, notwithstanding many critics, and there is some optimism that tax revenues could actually improve. Well, of course, that could be good news for California. It has the lowest credit rating of all 50 states, and that is a critical concern for my next guest. Barbara Lee is the Democratic member of Congress from the state's 9th District. She has recently written a memoir called Renegade for Peace and Justice. She has served in the U.S. Congress since 1998. Representative Lee, welcome to Bloomberg.
Glad to be with you today.
Let's talk a little bit about California. Now, as someone that has served in the congressional delegation since 1998, a lot has happened over the past decade or so. Can you give us a little bit of your thinking as to what's it going to take for California to, in a sense, restructure its economy, but also the budgetary process, which seems to be just stuck in a deficit mode for many years?
Well, certainly California has its challenges, as do other states. But I believe that now, under Governor Brown and with our legislature, we're going to turn this around. Some very tough decisions are going to be made. It's about priorities. And I do hope that, while we look at how, budgets get cut, unfortunately, that we go back to the drawing board and look at how to increase revenues. And I know the governor and the state legislature is debating that. Hopefully, we'll see something on the ballot that would allow us to increase revenues. We can't continue to cut the most vulnerable. I was in the legislature for 7.5 years, and even during those times under Governor Pete Wilson, a Republican governor, we had a very terrible situation where people who are disabled, senior citizens, people on public assistance, they were on the chopping board in terms of the cuts. And so I hope that California understands, as we restructure and meet these challenges, that we do not do that on the backs of the poor and low income and the working poor.
Do you think that there is going to be any kind of revisiting of the cuts for public education in California? Because the University of California system, a hallmark of national education that's being made available to many students at a public price.
I'm very sad about what's taking place. I'm a product of the University of California. I received my master's degree at UC Berkeley. And, we came to California, my family, and I write about this in my book, because schools were segregated in Texas. I couldn't go to public schools during that period. And we moved to California. Schools were integrated, and schools had the best possible, California had the best possible education system. And to see this now being dismantled and on the chopping block is very sad. I think that the students, parents, and teachers are going to rise up and just say more. We have a public education system. It must stay public. We cannot allow our public education system of our higher education system become privatized and become a private school for only the rich and the elite. And so I'm hoping that we'll find ways, and the governor, I know, is committed to higher ed, and I hope that they will find ways to make sure that at least education is preserved as they go through these terrible budget cuts.
Representative Lee, turn your attention now to Washington, D.C. and the potential for a government shutdown. Do you think that that's going to be averted?
I certainly hope it will be averted, because when we're talking about a government shutdown, we're talking about work furloughs, and we're talking about services that won't be provided, and we're talking about, again, the most vulnerable being hit. We're talking about senior citizens not receiving their checks. We're talking about veterans being hurt. We're talking about people who still have some reliance on our government, and it's very, very important that we find a way to ensure that we create a budget that is fair, that is balanced, but that does not hurt the most vulnerable. And I think that a government shutdown will be very, very devastating. And I know that our leadership is trying to find a way out of this, a path out of this. I know the president and White House are trying to find ways to mitigate against that. We don't want to see a government shutdown. This is about making sure that people stay on their jobs, that services are provided, and that people receive their checks. I mean, can you imagine people not receiving money? And these are people who don't have money in the bank. These are people who are low income.
Representative Barbara Lee from California, the author of Renegade for Peace and Justice. Coming up.